Carefree highway, let me slip away on you. Carefree highway, you've seen better days, the morning after blues, from my head down to my shoes. Carefree highway, let me slip away.
9 billion names of pod.
From Atlanta,
Please give to your local Atlanta blood bag bank.
it's the 9 Billion Names of Pod with Dan Bauman and Michael Reed. I'm Dan Bauman.
I'm shiny and chrome.
So, let's talk about some stuff.
Oi. Witness us talk about some stuff.
Yeah, we just, I, for the first time, the last guy on Earth who hadn't seen Fury Road, have now partaken.
Yeah, I think in the view count, it's you 1, me now 2, and sitting in with us on this episode is Bernard Setaro Clark. You may remember him from the Avengers podcast, 2-parter we did. What's your count on Fury Road?
Hi guys, how's it going? Thanks for having me back. Hold on, let me think. So twice in the theater, and then it hit cable not too long ago, and I think I watched it 5 more times at home, and then we just now watched it. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 times. I've seen it 8 times.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. So you win the podcast.
Now keep in mind that I've been a fan of this entire film series since its inception. I actually started with The Road Warrior when I was a kid. I didn't get to see it in the theater because they wouldn't take me. But as soon as it was out on like cable, in the 80s, because we had Cinemax and Showtime and HBO because my grandparents were like early adopters of all media.
That's pretty
cool.
cool.
So yeah, I had access to all of that shit when I was a kid.
So you had Betamax and
yeah, VHS, early adopters of VHS, all that. Never did Laserdisc though, but as a consequence, growing up, I got to see all kinds of stuff during my formative years. Between the ages of like 7 and 14 that I probably shouldn't have, and stuff that even today, like a lot of people probably wouldn't let their kids watch until they were adults. So I got exposed to a lot of stuff. So I saw The Road Warrior, I think the year after, because it would take it wouldn't take that long once a movie left the theaters for it to show up on cable. So
Right.
Like a year or so after it came out in the theaters, I actually got to see The Road Warrior, and fell in love with a genre I did not know existed.
Well, because it didn't up until that point, right?
It kind of did. The
dystopian future,
post-apocalypse films had existed before then.
but not like that.
But yeah, no, not like that. Nothing like
the
that.
car porn version of it,
Yeah. Just the way that film created a world from the ground up and created a vision that was wholly unique and took years later before I realized that also wholly Australian.
Yeah.
And then I had heard about Mad Max and knew what it was and knew it was the prequel, or I should say the first film in that Road Warrior was a sequel. So I eventually managed to get to see Mad Max.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually I was probably like 13 or 14 when I convinced somebody to rent it at a video store for me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember those days when you had to, I'm not old enough to see this. I tried to get a junior high school English teacher to take me to see The Shining because I wanted to see it so badly. And of course, he rightfully, I get fired for that, for taking a kid to an R-rated film. What the hell?
Yeah, I used to be able to convince my grandfather to take me all kinds of R-rated films. Because it just never occurred to him that he shouldn't.
Right.
So,
that's an awesome kind of. So this Deadpool, it's a love story. Yeah. Okay. We'll go and see.
Yeah.
It.
And I knew when I was a kid. I knew I wasn't supposed to see certain movies, and then I would just go to my grandfather and go, I want to see the movie about ninjas. It's awesome. It's just about ninjas. And he'd be like, yeah, all right. What's it rated? I'm like, I don't know. It's for kids. It's
well, the R rating is like the warning sticker on the albums. I might not have had any interest in the film or the album. Like, oh, you don't want me to see it, or you want to keep me from it? Well, they goes to the top of my
Right.
fucking list.
Well, back then too, like I don't know about your experience, but back when I was watching R-rated movies in theaters, R meant you just had to have an adult with you. That's it. That's
True,
all it meant.
yeah. Right.
You had to have an adult. So I would just convince an adult to come with me.
Right.
And that's so. Yeah, so I saw Road Warrior pretty early after it came out, and then I went back and watched Mad Max later. Saw the American, the really shitty American dubbed version first, then eventually got to see the Australian original language cut, which is so much better. And then of course Thunderdome in the theaters.
We don't
like,
need another hero.
yeah, oh yeah. Which also still, even though it in some ways is inferior, and with good reason. Because of some of the shenanigans that happened around its production, but Thunderdome, like I went and saw that movie in the movie theater 3 times,
Right.
before it was out, before it ran out.
Now, I have one question about that particular film. Who run Bartertown?
Master Blaster.
Okay.
I just wanted to check.
Incidentally, one of my all-time favorite characters in any film ever. Master Blaster, just absolutely the coolest. I mean, just one of the most amazing concepts. Like the symbiotic nature of their relationship, the hulking, horrific, ogreish giant with the face of an angel, and his like, seemingly vicious, sadistic, like midget overlord. Riding around in his little neck saddle, only to have him like turn out to be like kind of a good guy victim, like setting a tone. I mean, the whole series like is all about moral ambiguity and shades of gray and doing what you got to do to survive.
Yeah.
And then, like that movie's revelation at the end, where you're like, oh, he wasn't a bad guy, he just had to do it to survive.
Victim of circumstances.
So having seen all of those films a million times and loved them, I was very, very excited when this film came out. And
Because the break in time is what, 28 years?
yeah.
Like it's significant.
It's a big chunk of time. I'm trying to remember when Thunderdome came out.
It was
80,
early 80s.
I want to say
yeah.
no, not early. I want to say 85 or 86.
Yeah, it was mid to late
still.
because I was in high school. So that was 85, 86 sounds about
You know, the
right.
only reason I know that it was 85 or 86 because it was post comeback of Tina Turner,
Yeah.
which was 83, 84.
Correct,
there you go.
correct.
Private Dancer. So that's how I mark everything.
And actually that comeback, which was incredibly successful for her, like that she was peaking at that point.
Oh, yeah.
on her second time around.
Yeah.
She owned pretty much 2/3 of the 80s in a
Yeah.
way, in a non Madonna shake your booty kind of way, or that the sexualized, more like I'm kicking ass
Right.
singing. Now, both Dan and I have seen the first 3 films about once when we were kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You are far more versed. Before we jump into Fury Road.
Well, I also went back right before Fury Road.
I'll
I made a
rewatch.
point and rewatched all 3 films right before it came out, and sat down with my kid and walked him through the first 2. We didn't make it through Thunderdome, but we watched we watched Mad Max, we watched The Road Warrior, and of course it's just kids these days. He was like, yeah, that's cool,
Yeah.
car chases are cool.
because you saw them in their proper time slot in
Right.
history. Like going now to see The Exorcist, and you're like, whatever.
Kid,
You see The Exorcist back then, you're freaking the fuck out.
I've learned the hard way over the last several years that kids today, hold on, let me get the right voice for this. Kids today got no appreciation for history.
In my day.
jaded
They
as
don't.
fuck.
You try to frame something in such a way so that they understand. Like the thing we're about to see is the foundation of all these other things
Yes.
that you love,
Right.
and that you think is cool. So this is the thing that all that stuff came from, and they see it and they're like, okay, yeah, it's like forcing them to watch a history film. They're like, yeah, the thing that I like is still better. But I have to do that because the thing that I loathe, the thing that like drives me absolutely crazy, is when you sit down with a kid and you get him to try to watch something older that maybe is the one of the predecessors, antecedents, is that right? No,
Yep. Well, after.
Antecedent after one of the predecessors to the things that they see now, and they go, man, it's just copying that other thing,
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that just makes me want to strangle them.
Well, it's like when I in my 20s when I first read Lord of the Rings, and I went, "Oh, everything I've read since then is from this."
Yes.
Yeah, everything came from this. This is the bedrock, right?
Now-
This
now-
is like a more boring version of D&D.
Yeah.
Now, for Dan and I's benefit, and for the rest of the people out there who may not have gone back and rewatched or even seen the first three films, give us a paint a picture of this universe, this world that George Miller has created, so we have a foundation to talk about Fury Road.
Well, the important thing to know about the original Mad Max is that it is actually set like kind of during the last days of civilization. It is sort of the beginning of the end. It's I guess if the apocalypse is the collapse, then this is sort of and the collapse that he presents, unlike a lot of apocalypse films today, where there's always like a single cause, like it's zombies or the Ice Age or something that
Or nuclear war.
some specific event over a short period of time that causes everything to fall apart. Miller's vision was like he understood sort of how it would kind of really go down, or that it'll be a death by inches. That it'll be a slow downward spiral.
That's what we're doing to ourselves right now.
Right, a slow disintegration caused by a variety of different factors. And so the idea that he presents is like it's sort of a lengthy, protracted collapse where environmental damage and dwindling oil reserves causes increased warfare, which causes famine, which causes riots, which causes the collapse of infrastructure, and then eventually sort of the social contract kind of dissolves, and then everything just kind of falls into shit. And then at some point somewhere along the line, somebody's just like, fuck it, drop the bombs. And that sort of puts the nails in the coffin. So Mad Max happens during that time. And Max Rockatansky, who's a young like highway patrol officer, he's a cop, who drives this sort of badass police interceptor with his partner, and they basically patrol the wide open spaces in rural Australia. And
there's a lot of space.
Yeah, a lot of space, a lot of long.
They call that
straight
the
roads.
middle of Australia.
A lot of long straight roads.
The outback.
And in Mad Max, you have this more or less the world looks kind of like you would expect it to at the time period. I mean, it's just lots of small towns and shitty cars, and everybody's kind of broke. And there's these gangs, these very very violent, psychopathic, roving, nomadic biker gangs that are huge gangs of 40 and 50 and 60 guys, and they're like outlaws. They just ride around, and they ride into towns, and they take what they want, and they kill who they want, and they rape and pillage, and nothing can stop them. And they're absolutely nihilistic. They literally have declared war on society, and so they're all crazy, and they're all nihilistically hell-bent on destruction. And it's about the first film is effectively about how the cops, focusing on Max specifically, but if the cops in general are kind of at war with this one particular gang that they can't stop. And the other thing too, like the world that he paints looks kind of a lot like ours, but everything's just ever so slightly shittier. Like everything's kind of dingy, and
like Detroit.
Yeah, worse. Like even like the nobody's got any money, and there's no infrastructure, and so like the police department, the building where they work, like everything's falling apart, and it looks abandoned. Like the building looks like the cops are operating out of an abandoned building, and it basically comes down. That first film is really just sort of a very small story about this war that occurs between Max and these other cops, and this gang of psychopaths led by this like just beautiful lunatic named Toe Cutter, played by this this Australian actor you've never heard of and never seen, but apparently people in Australia know who he is. Who gives this wonderfully, brilliantly, like loopy, like lunatic performance. And then over the course of their sort of feud, they end up he's got a wife, a young wife, and a baby. I think it's a son, if I recall correctly. But he's got like a toddler, like a 2-year-old toddler. They end up murdering his wife and child in front of him, and he kind of goes. He snaps, and he ends up, turning in his badge, and he goes and he steals this badass police interceptor. He gets horribly injured too, like his knee gets just run over by a motorcycle, and his arm gets all messed up. So he like puts together this like temporary leg brace so he can limp around, and he basically. The film culminates with him single-handedly taking on the last remnants of the gang, and he hunts them all down one by one, and he murders them. He just assassinates them.
So it's like Death Wish post-apocalypse.
Yeah, but this is all in the final act of the film. So like the film is just this weird, sort of brutal, brooding build to this, and then the orgy of violence at the end is he hunts them all down, and then culminates in a final showdown between him and Toe Cutter, which is a car chase of him chasing Toe Cutter in his Interceptor, and Toe Cutter's on a motorcycle, and then and then in the end, I think Toe Cutter he wins. Toe Cutter gets killed, and then that's pretty much the end of the movie. He just kind of limps off in the sunset, and you're left with this sort of nihilistic sense of like, what was it all for?
Yeah,
what does it all mean? So that was Mad Max. Now the thing about Mad Max is that it was kind of came out of the late exploitation film 70s. It was basically that movie was meant to be a sort of weird, vaguely sci-fi-esque near future excuse to have a bunch of amazing car chases and car crashes. Many of which apparently were filmed by literally putting an untrained, terrified cameraman on the back of a motorcycle with a stuntman driving, and then driving that motorcycle down the highway at 100 miles an hour, literally 100 miles an hour, so with the cameraman hanging off the back of the bike, holding the camera low to the ground so they could get these amazing shots, in violation of every and all safety laws, because Australia.
Yeah.
So that's Mad Max, and then jump ahead a bunch of years to Road Warrior, which is set a considerable amount of time later, well and truly after the end. The collapse has happened. Civilization is gone, and you have Max still in that stolen police interceptor, still wearing a modified remnant of his black leather cop suit. Now with a much more elaborate leg brace, with the sawed off shotgun in a side holster, and basically he's gone from rogue cop to just I mean the title is self-explanatory. He's the road warrior. He just wanders around surviving, trying to find food, gasoline, bullets, whatever he can get his hands on. And of course, if you haven't seen that film, the nutshell story of that is he stumbles in this wasteland. There's these roving gangs of psychopaths. This is sort of the evolution of those biker gangs who've now graduated to full-on nomadic tribes of maniacal raiders in a variety of vehicles that they have modified and equipped, and they just drive around just taking what they want, and you either join them or you're food. And he comes across this entirely by accident. He stumbles across this camp, this what looks like an oil refinery, and fuel is gone. It's impossible to find fuel. It's incredibly scarce. So there's this oil refinery, a little tiny oil refinery that's been turned into a little fortress, and there's this whole group of people living there. but they're trapped because they're surrounded by this gang of marauders led by this deranged mutant monster called Lord Humongous, who is this like 7 foot tall, like incredible, like built like a professional bodybuilder, like oiled barbarian wearing like a leather loincloth, and has a brushed like metal hockey mask on his clearly like scarred and mutated head, where the little wisps of hair. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan the Barbarian as Jason Voorhees. And I'm not kidding. I'm pretty sure that was the impetus that went into designing the character.
Right.
That would have been about the right period for it.
And again, the movie was just creates this incredible vision of a horrible future where everything is terrible, and you know, good people or anybody even showing a semblance of humanity is basically victims for the roving armies of psychopaths. And in this, there's Max, who's not a good guy. He's in that movie throughout that entire film. He's not about helping people. He's not. There's nothing noble. He literally just wants to. He rescues one of the people who he finds who almost dies, and he rescues this guy who got caught by the bandits, and he kills a couple of bandits and rescues the guy, and he takes the guy to the refinery, specifically because the guy promises him, if you get me back home, they'll give you fuel. They got all the fuel. You can get fuel for your car. And so it's purely self-serving. And he shows up, and they kind of almost don't let him in, and then they let him in, and then they get the guy, and of course Lord Humongous shows up and tries to kill them all. And they're like, the people in the little camp are like, you know, what do you want? What do you want? Why are you here? And he's like, I brought the guy. He belongs to you. I brought him to you. He said, if I brought him to you, you give me fuel, so I can be on my way. I'm just here for my reward, and then I'm getting the hell out of here. And of course, by the time the guy was wounded, by the time he gets the guy back there, the guy dies. So
Unfortunate.
So and they basically, and the people basically are like, well, your deal was with him, and he's dead. So fuck you. So he's kind of stuck, and the rest of the movie is basically just him ends up accidentally helping these people. Not because he wants to, not because it's out of any sense of nobility, but just out of pure necessity. Yeah. Because now he's stuck with them in this situation, and he has to help them in order to get out of the situation. And that turns into like one of the coolest car chases. That the whole like latter third of the film is just this one long protracted car chase, where he's driving this fuel tanker truck that's been turned into a battle wagon, and they've got a few other vehicles against this horde of road barbarians who are trying to get the tanker truck because they think it's full of fuel, and chaos ensues, and it's just fantastic. And I mean, that as a kid seeing that, like that sparked an entire line of fantasy thinking for me and imagination of this idea of like the running battle, like the fight sequence that occurs on mobile platforms of vehicles and leaping from car to car, and like the fact that at no point in time does any vehicle like stop moving unless it gets destroyed, and that created a whole like slew of associations. So that movie like was amazing. And of course Thunderdome like takes it into a couple of different directions. Thunderdome is set like many years later, and what Thunderdome presents is like what happens on the other side of that, like after enough years go by
when everything settles down.
Everything settles down, and civilization, the remnants of humanity will maybe start to build again, and you begin to see that is the burgeoning of this new society built on very primitive rules and tribal customs, and the idea that like everybody's out for themselves, but trade is still a necessity. And so you end up with Barter Town, which in the middle of the desert there's this city with hundreds and hundreds of people in it. It's like the largest population center in the region. And, they've got laws. Now, the town's run by basically a crime boss, and the town exists to profit those who run it. But ultimately, the town is where all these people come together to trade and to try and, get the resources they need by trading whatever they have. And, of course, he ends up getting embroiled. He's older, and he's, like, still driving the Interceptor, but at the beginning of that film, it's the same Interceptor, you think, maybe, but it's being pulled by oxen because the engine doesn't work anymore, and he's turned it into a giant covered wagon, and it gets stolen from him, and he ends up hoofing it to Bartertown, and his whole thing is he just wants his frickin' car back. He just wants his frickin' car back. And he ends up getting embroiled in the internal politics of Bartertown, and out of necessity, he goes ahead and, like, takes a job, and it goes sour, and then shenanigans ensue. Now, the movie takes a weird turn. That film takes a weird turn because... And I didn't know all of this information until somewhat recently, but apparently, and this is what I've heard, and I haven't verified it, but it was told to me that apparently the helicopter pilot who filmed a lot of the aerial shots died, I think in an accident during the filming of the movie. And this helicopter pilot who'd worked on all the previous films was a really close friend of George Miller's, and I believe, if I was told correctly, that George Miller was so kind of bereft that he had to stop working on the film. He couldn't keep going because his friend had just died. So they brought in a different director to finish the film. Because this was, the first two films were basically kind of independent films, but this third film was a joint production with a major Hollywood company.
Yeah.
So they were like,
and you could tell with the cross promotion and the soundtrack and the whole.
So they were like, no, we got to finish the film. So the movie takes, like, halfway through, the movie takes a weird turn and turns into this whole other thing. And I've heard that that's because it was literally a different director came in to finish it. And the tone and that the second half of the film, like, has a weird shift in tone too, where it becomes sort of not less serious, but has a little more humor to it, and a little more weird element of levity. And that's where he gets kicked out of the Bartertown. He gets sentenced to gulag, where they basically tie him up and put a helmet on his head so he can't see, and they put him on the back of a mule with a carrot on a stick in front of it, and they just send it out into the desert to die. And he ends up getting saved by a group of feral children living in an idyllic canyon in the desert that happens to have a water source and plant life, where apparently an old passenger plane, like an airliner, crashed into this weird valley, this canyon, and there were survivors from the plane crash, but they couldn't escape. So they just stayed there because they had food and shelter and water. And so apparently over time, like, all of the adults died, and all that's left are these children who were all born in this crack in the earth and have never known anything else beyond what this small space they've lived in, and with all the death of all the adults, they've only have these stories they were told about the other world.
It's kind of like a modified Lord of the Flies.
Yeah. And so they just have these, and they're like this weird little Aboriginal tribal group of feral children of varying ages who have managed to survive, but they don't understand everything, and they have this very skewed view of the world. And he comes in, and they think he's the pilot, this mystical being that they've been waiting for to come back to save them. So they think he's the pilot, and so half the tribe wants him to take them out of there, and the other half want to kill him, and so that they don't have to leave. And he basically ends up using the kids that want him to leave to get him out of the crack and through the desert. He basically, in a really self-serving way, like, tricks the kids into taking him out of there so that he can get back to Bartertown and get revenge on the person who betrayed him. And then ultimately you end up with this really wonderful protracted car chase at the end. And in a lot of ways,
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
Protracted car chases.
Now, to be fair, Thunderdome is cool, but it only has the one car chase. It's all kind of, the first half of the film was concentrated around Bartertown, and then the next leg of the movie is, where he's with the feral children, and then they end up getting him back to Bartertown, and he ends up stealing a vehicle and teaming up with Master from Master Blaster, and they end up in this protracted car chase that's very much like the car chase from Road Warrior, and in some ways is the predecessor and the sort of spiritual precursor to Fury Road. And so that's basically it. You've got this wonderful, weird, fantastic post-apocalypse world where you see human civilization begin the decline, then fall apart. After the decline, you see what's the horrors that are left, and then you see society begin to kind of reform. So what he did with Fury Road is really interesting. Fury Road I believe is set sometime. It's not a reboot, although it is, but it's not, because he said it is set within the continuity of the greater universe. It is set at some nebulous time period between the Road Warrior and Thunderdome.
Huh.
It could almost be a contemporary of Thunderdome, another place in Australia where this group of people coalesced around this guy as opposed to Bartertown or some other place.
So he ends up, in Fury Road, it's sort of like he took all of these ideas that he'd been playing with in the previous films, and he boiled them down to their most essential essence, then turned the dial up to 11, and took everything he'd ever learned about storytelling to craft this incredible, sort of simple yet dense, multi-layered story told with a deftness and economy of language that is mind-boggling for me.
That's one of the things I noticed. There was more being told to the audience via
nothing is told. Nothing is told to the audience.
More is being told to the audience via the silences and the little looks here and there. It speaks everything in that scene. Some of the scene between Max and Furiosa.
Yeah.
There's just got it. I know what's going on.
There is no exposition in that film.
Right.
No,
Right.
none.
But what I'm saying is that there are things being communicated, told to the audience without words. It's
Absolutely.
all in small looks or maybe one line of dialogue that brings 15 different concepts. That's what's going on.
We're all spoilers here, right? We don't.
Oh,
we don't
yeah,
worry
go,
about,
go.
let's- Okay, so let me ask you something. So, the scene where when Furiosa first veers off the path she's supposed to be on, and Immortan Joe is brought to Immortan Joe's attention, and he turns and he runs through his base,
His garden,
and you get this very brief, quick flash of Immortan Joe's life.
Yep.
The rows upon rows of hydroponic vegetables, and you've got the room full of it starts with the room full of the milk mothers who are basically just generating mother's milk, which is their primary commodity, that they trade to Bullet Town and Gas Town, and then he goes to that vault door.
Yep.
Right, and you're like, what? That's a massive vault door that took enormous effort to get there, and what does he want with that? And what's he got behind there? And he opens the vault door and he runs into that room, right? And it's like a living space.
Yeah.
And you there's a pool fed by the little rivulet, and what happened there? Tell me what happened before he got there.
My guess is that Furiosa worked her way through the ranks to command a war rig. Maybe might have been his right-hand woman, perhaps, because he named her as they were sent out. So
definitely
she's
one of his honored lieutenants,
trusted,
one of his trusted
and
honored
she
lieutenants.
found a way to either get through that door or get surreptitiously through another way to get these women out of there.
But why?
I think it has something to do with what was done to her. She was kidnapped.
Right.
We're assuming by, by Joe back in his younger days,
Right.
I suppose.
But no, well, focus on like what you know about the relationship between her and those women, her and his breeders. What do you remember? What about you? What do you remember? What didn't they show us?
What didn't they show us?
The extraction.
Correct.
They came willingly
How do we know that?
because they weren't restrained on the rig. They
Right.
were. They it looked like they were on board. They knew the plan. They knew
but why did they leave?
they didn't want to be breeders anymore.
Right. How did the film communicate all that in that scene? Do you remember?
I remember there was writing on the wall.
What was the writing on the wall?
Who killed the world?
Right.
And I can't remember what the other one was.
And we are not.
People are not things.
People are
Yeah.
not things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's an entire sequence that in any other film they would have shown you.
Yeah.
And instead, what you're simply shown is the aftermath. And with these very deft touches, you're left to fill in the details of the backstory,
Right.
none of which was communicated to you directly.
No.
But you're given these scrawls on the wall. People are not things. Who killed the world? And there was a third phrase.
Yeah, there's a
we
number
don't-
of things on
Something
there.
like I don't want to die. We don't want to die here.
Yeah.
But the gist of it is basically that you get a sense of what happened without having seen it, and then you get just a simple, brief exchange between him and that old lady who's obviously their tutor, where she says, he's like, where has she taken them? And she goes, she didn't take them. They begged her to take them out of here. That's basically, to me, that was the first point in the film, watching it the very first time through, where I realized how brilliant this script was. Because this script does every stroke of the script was maximum amount of communication and information with the least amount of words.
My guess is that if you were handed a copy of the script, it would look more like a treatment.
20 pages. I don't know, man. 20 pages.
I mean, if it was just dialogue,
Yeah.
now
It'd be
obviously far more.
like 4 lines of dialogue between 2 characters, and then a line and car chase.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Fill in the blanks here.
yeah,
How long is the car chase? Well, it's about a third of the film.
No,
Okay.
no. If you think about it, if you go back and you look, that basically it's just one car chase.
It just
With
doesn't
one little,
stop.
one little.
It's one car chase the
Gotcha, you
entire
little
film. It's one car chase the entire film.
With one little break.
with a couple of little punctuated beats where you're like, and take a breath,
Yeah.
and take a breath.
It's almost like they come around the lap and it's like, and we're gonna make the same lap again.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, and along on that note, I think the thing that stuck out to me most of all about this film was, and hearing you speak about the originals, the detail and the world building that he was able to accomplish, and I mean, knowing that it's kind of it's the same director, and I mean, everything has a purpose. Not to compare to Star Wars, but the original, you look at everything, it looks like it has a purpose, and it's dirty and it's busted up, and it's the same feel for me. It's like, this is a real place. Everything in this has a purpose. Just using Max as a blood bag because he's a universal donor,
But and then like tattooing
all his vital
information on his back, and yeah,
and how they use everything, and using the mother's milk, and just phenomenal.
Also, I love there is a civilization in this film. It's a terrible one. It's an awful place to live, but it is civilization. You have these 3 you have these 3 citadels. You have the Citadel, the Bullet Farm, and Gastown, and they're actually pretty close together.
Yeah.
Like, they're close enough together that they can actually see one another.
It's within a day's ride of any of the other two.
Yeah, they can almost see each other. So you know that Gastown and you don't ever see the Bullet Farm, but you know it's close. You know that Gastown and the Citadel are close enough together that it's probably only a couple hours drive, right, across bad terrain. But the fact that, like, intrinsically you understand, so Morton Joe's got water, so he deals in water and milk.
Yep.
Human
and
milk.
Food, because he can grow the food.
Yeah, milk, water, and food, which he trades to Gastown for fuel and to Bullet Town for bullets and firearms. And
that's a nice symbiotic relationship.
Right, and then you see it in the relationship between the 3 leaders when the other 2 eventually show up, and you realize, oh, it's 3 horrible potentate warlords, each of whom is, disgusting and evil in their own right, but has, achieved the top of their food chain, and has, each has their own army, but they've cut a deal with each other. They've got a symbiotic trade agreement going on. And then the other gangs that are their enemies, you'll notice, are all, like, much shittier. Like, have a lot less going for them, have smaller armies and
smaller territory,
Smaller vehicles, than
smaller vehicles,
motorbikes,
shabbier vehicles. You see the buzzards who have all those spikes and are clearly speaking Russian, and like lots of blades and sharp pokey things. And then I don't remember what they call the other marauders who are all on motorcycles, who end up like.
I don't think she ever named.
I don't think she names them. I don't recall her ever. I mean, I've seen the movie 8 times, and I still don't know the name of that gang. But it doesn't really matter. You don't need to. You just know that gang is actually kind of a shitty gang. They're, like, low on the food chain. They don't have a lot of people.
But give them a motorcycle and a conveniently placed ramp,
right?
And they're gonna fuck your shit up.
They hang out in these canyons where their motorcycles are an asset, and all those other gangs' vehicles are actually can't
go
be used,
up.
right?
Yeah.
So, like, they use territory to hide, but the open plains are controlled by these 3 large sort of city-states. The fact that this all happens in such a quick, it's all demonstrated. It's all demonstrated. Right. You're basically left to infer all of this information.
Right. Well, and even though I had seen the first 3 so long ago, I could name maybe 4 facts from the 3 films because they'd all,
right.
Bartertown and a few other things remained in my head. The rest I had forgotten. And in watching that, I knew that world perfectly.
Right, and that's
because there was nothing. Yeah. It was set out very nicely, and it's long ago or in the no rambling. Get John Hurt to do the narration at the top of the film. Yeah. None of that shit. No scrawl.
There is narration at the top of the film, but it doesn't feel like narration because it's kind of not. It almost is like poetry.
Yeah,
it's very illiterate, and it's again deftly communicated.
Well, but it's not setting up like the story you're about to see, or here's the painting of this world.
Yeah,
it's like one little facet of something.
Even the exposition isn't really exposition.
Right, it's not giving you anything really to help you understand what you're about to see. You just understand it because if you watch the film as a human,
it's setting a tone.
It's setting a tone. But as long as you're someone who just, actually engages with the film rather than just watches and doesn't even let your brain touch on it. You know what I mean? Some people can watch a film and they see it and their brain doesn't, like, why did that happen? Who's that? They just don't even connect with it that way. if you watch films like that, yeah, Fury Road's you're going to lose a lot of it. But if you're actually engaged with the film,
I would make the argument that even then, if you are that's part of why the movie I think has been so successful is that even if you're not the kind of person to sort of try to fill in the blanks and you need everything spoon fed for you.
You still get some awesome shit.
You just what you're even if you don't fully understand what's happening or why well that's the thing. The motivations are crystal clear. You absolutely understand why the characters are doing what they're doing. You don't need all the backstory. You just okay, well they have one conversation in the film that explains why Furiosa is doing what she's doing, and it's the briefest of conversations, and it's one of the longest conversations in the whole damn movie. And it's like 4 or 5 lines of dialogue, and it's so simple and straightforward. I mean, he basically point blank asks her, "Why are you doing this?" And she goes, "Redemption, like because I've done some." And you're left to infer, I've done a bunch of horrible shit, and I feel bad about it.
And the thing I love is that they did not try to explain her arm. Nope, it's there. So you could read into it.
There.
She was punished, or maybe she was captured and she cut it. I mean, you don't know what happened.
Maybe she was born that way.
It could be, exactly. Yeah. You have absolutely no idea.
You're one of the things that I pointed out while we were watching it. Again, this was like the 8th viewing of the film, and it never really occurred to me to inquire about how so many characters have oxygen feeds. Like all of Morton Joe's children and a lot of his upper level people have like little oxygen feeds, or they have little tubes. At one point, like the old lady, the teacher that he kidnaps or that brings with him to go hunt down the brides. Like at one point there's a quick shot in his car where she seems like she's been overcome, and they've got an oxygen mask on her. And it occurs to me watching this film the 8th time around, I went, I thought of this before, but I hadn't connected the dots. The one question I had watching the movie the first time through was like, how there's no plant life. Like, there's no plant life. You don't see any, except for at his citadel, you don't really see any green. There's no water. There's no plant life.
One dead tree.
Yeah, well, one dead tree that Nux doesn't even know what it is. That thing. You mean the tree? Like, that's gotta be really bad for the overall oxygen content of the planet. And it occurs to me watching the film that I believe they're all operating in a low oxygen environment. Notice how frequently you'll see characters that are fairly hale and hearty do stuff, and they get winded, and they're kind of tired quickly. And it occurs to me that they're operating globally, probably in a low oxygen environment, where what little oxygen is left, only the strongest, halest, and hardiest people, like Max, like Furiosa, have adapted to operating in, and everybody else is kind of having a little trouble. And so Morton Joe's got his rebreather, and Rictus has his little oxygen tubes in his nose, and that's kind of one of those little details that the movie just really doesn't make a big deal about.
Right.
And you also mentioned something that I hadn't thought about before. Where are they driving around? They could be at the quote-unquote bottom of the previous ocean.
Well, that's what the big salt is. They talk about the big salt towards the end when they get to the green place and it ends up being dead, and they're like, well, I guess we're going to drive across the big salt and see what's over there, and that's the ocean. Yeah. I'm not sure which ocean, but that's an ocean, and it's gone. And so,
and as we know, most of the oxygen comes from the algae in the ocean,
right?
And so there ain't no ocean. You're right on target with the low oxygen.
This is Australia. Who knows what the rest of the planet looks like? But I'm guessing that if they can drive across the Big Salt, it's pretty fucked worldwide. Mm-hmm. It's not like you could remove one of the oceans from the world and we'll still be okay. That's not going to happen,
right? So all of this stuff. I mean, it's basically an action movie, right? It's basically an action movie.
Another thing, they're all running internal combustion engines.
Yeah.
You gotta have oxygen for that.
Right. But I love how they like all of the engines, like in every vehicle, all of the engines have turbochargers, which are what? Those are air intakes designed to hyperoxygenate the engines.
Maybe they just need that
you
much
would just need that if you were operating an internal combustion engine in a low oxygen environment.
Right.
So I mean, this is a hypothesis drawn from what the movie is showing me.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be surprised to find out, that was something that was in his, on his, his list of like facts about the world when he's building the world together. Like, there's no plants, so there's very little oxygen, so everybody's kind of wheezing, and some people need oxygen just to walk around, and all of the vehicles need big turbocharger air intakes in order to be able to function. And again, what he did is he took everything he built on in the first three films, amazing car chases, basically an action movie at its heart, and a really shitty world in which it's really terrible to live in, and this character, this great I mean, Max is basically an anti-hero. Like, he's a hero.
He's barely a hero.
He ends up. Well, that's the thing. You see this in The Road Warrior, and you see it in Thunderdome, and you see it here. That's one of the things that the through line for those three films that he's maintained is this idea of a legend, a legacy, a mythic character whose story is told by other people, because through his actions he saved them. In each of those films, the people that survive in The Road Warrior who get away, they get away because of his sacrifice. And they are telling, at the end of that film, they're telling his story as the child, the feral child in that film that he saves is an old man sitting around a campfire telling these other children in an abandoned skyscraper in some burned out city on the edge of the ocean. He's telling these children the story of Max, who saved them all.
And what do you think Furiosa's going to do?
Right.
It looks like she's about to take over the Citadel. Maybe
one would hope. One would hope.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard a rumor.
But you also hold on. You also get that in Thunderdome. At the end of Thunderdome, the children that he saves, the little group of Lord of the Flies tribal children, they survive and they become adults. And at the end of that film, you're left with this image of them telling the story to their children about this great hero Max, who saved them from certain doom through his sacrifice. And again, throughout both of those films, he was entirely self-serving, and it's almost and in all of those films, like, his nobility is kind of a begrudging afterthought for him. Like,
he's an accidental hero,
right? You get the sense that but that's what I love about the character, because he's a tragic figure, because he's not a bad person. He's just so horribly traumatized and burned out.
You see how haunted he is.
Yeah, he's haunted. Exactly, he's haunted. He's haunted by that.
Well, he is of the generation that remembers how it was before.
Right.
Kids born into this, they're not going to have that kind of level of trauma. They just, this is what the world is. We don't know any better. But this that transitional generation that's going to war and just going crazy and like trying to hold on while trying to grab for something new.
Plus, it isn't until about 2/3 of the way through the movie that he's starts doing things on purpose.
Right.
Like he's just
reacting.
at the beginning. He's just I got to get off this thing, and I got to get my
or the turning point where he hands a gun to Furiosa. It's like,
exactly.
I'm not holding a gun on you. I'm with you. Let's
in the beginning,
this.
he's like, "Don't brand me," and then it's getting out of that, and then getting off the car.
He's reacting throughout the first half of the movie, and the turning point is when he that turning point is when they bring the truck and they stop the truck in that canyon, and the turning point actually comes from something that she does. They have this distrust. Obviously, like, at the first opportunity she has, she's going to take him out, and he knows it. And so he's just trying to protect himself in this horrible situation. I will fucking kill you. Like you need to just get me the hell out of here.
But she turns the rig over to him.
Yeah, when she turns the rig over to him and she tells him the code to turn it on, that's the turning point.
Yeah.
she trusts him in that moment. She basically is like, just fucking help me out here, dude. And in that moment, you see him like succumb to his humanity and just
Good. Well.
All right,
yeah.
I won't be a total shitbag.
and that's the turning point. But then from that point forward, he becomes an active, engaged actor in the film, which I love, and I love how they just deftly start working together. Like right from the once they're in combat together, you just like, oh, these are equals, these are survivors, these are warriors.
Well, there's a similar evolution with Nux as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, how many times did he get all shiny and chroma? Aww.
Yeah.
It's like, all right now. Oh, okay.
Well, here's the thing about Nux. All right, Nux is always a noble figure throughout that entire film.
Yeah, he believes it. He believes his
believes
cause,
that what he's doing is right. What he does is he learns that his cause is unjust, and he switches to a just cause. He's actually the most noble figure in the film, in my opinion, because throughout that entire film, he is desperate to sacrifice himself in the service of a higher cause.
Yeah.
He just hasn't found the right one.
and he's not good at it.
He's not good at it. He's really terrible at it. He's so terrible
He's
at
like
it.
Harold and Maude, but I'm like, that didn't work.
Mediocre.
Now, have you heard? I heard one source like a couple months ago that Miller's saying, "Fury Road, that's one of 3. I'm doing a trilogy." Have you heard about?
I have not. I have heard a rumor that they're definitely doing a second one. I have not seen that substantiated, but
They better get working because what is he like 88? He's up there, isn't
dude, Michael,
he? Yeah.
he's Australian.
Yeah.
He'll
Oh,
live to be 140. Barring any violent accident, he'll live forever because that's just what Australians do.
yeah.
When you live in one of the most potentially hostile
Oh yeah.
continents on Earth.
What do they say? Like 2/3 of all the most venomous things that will kill you in the entire world. 2/3 of them are native.
Well,
Not just they're native to Australia.
Well, the Great Barrier Reef too. The Great Barrier Reef just to the north,
What's left of it.
just the north of Australia has or had like the highest concentration of poisonous and predatory species in the world.
Yeah.
Like everything there can kill you.
Kill you. Yeah.
So yeah, it tends to breed people tougher, I guess.
Now, let me ask you, when you first heard they were doing a new Mad Max movie, okay, were you excited about that? Or were you excited when you heard it was being done, that George Miller was doing it? Or did that just amp it up?
that information occurred at the same time.
Okay.
The very first time I heard, the very first piece of information I got about Fury Road was George Miller is doing another Mad Max film.
Right.
And I think I exploded my pants.
Now, if you had just heard the news, new Mad Max film, would you have been tentative?
I would have been initially excited, and then I would have gone, wait a minute, who's directing it?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't George Miller, I'd be very suspicious.
You want to look up the pedigree of the person who is doing that guy. All right.
To be fair, I am not one of those people that like I hear that they're doing a remake and then I'm just immediately like bullshit. I do not. I made peace with the fact that Hollywood's just gonna recycle stuff. That's just what they do.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and I'll be honest, not all of their recycling attempts have been terrible to me. I have seen a number of remakes where I'm like, it's not as good as the original, but it was an enjoyable movie.
Yeah.
I have a tremendous ability to detach myself when watching a film.
And a remake does not suddenly degrade the original. If anything, people watch it and go, why was this remade? Let me go check out the original.
And it doesn't replace the original.
No.
The original
No.
still exists.
I mean, my crew out in California is going crazy over this remake of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm like,
to be fair, it's a television remake.
right, it's a television
for
remake,
television.
and it's not going to erase the original. It couldn't possibly be worse than the original because, let's face it, that was a fucking awful film.
Yeah.
Great music. So just chill.
Yeah,
Maybe-
somebody said to me, "What if it's a total train wreck?" I was like, "The original's a train
Yeah,
wreck."
exactly.
To be fair, it's an adaptation of a stage play.
Yeah,
Right.
So they're not always that great.
Right.
Stage, there's a thing about live performance because of the visceral and immediate nature of it that it pulls you in. The experience is decidedly different. You can get away with stuff on stage. It's more difficult to get away with in film. And there's also, just like there's tons of stuff you can do on film that you can't do on stage. Like, you could never do Fury Road, the
musical.
You could try, but it wouldn't be the same.
No, use the same kind of staging technique as Starlight Express. Each actor is one of the rigs. Get them on. Come on, Bernie. Get some polecats coming in from the wings.
I wish you could see the face I'm making.
I can. Yeah.
It is a mixture. It is a mixture of both appreciation for your effort and extreme dubiousness of the veracity of your idea. No, just no.
Okay.
No.
Now, okay. Let me.
You open that door, man. You are opening the door for Maximum Overdrive, the musical.
Oh God!
Now that I would go see.
Where each of the actors is a Mack truck.
Yeah.
Just so you could say I was there on opening and closing night. No, what I was going to pitch was, all right. We do Fury Road the musical, but we stage it like Monster Truck Rally in a stadium where there's enough space to just do all sorts of weird, fucked up shit.
All right, I'm intrigued.
All right.
Tell me more.
I'm just,
all right,
you know.
A lot of GoPros.
And,
lot of GoPros.
Now there you have a great potential for crossover there because I think you'll pull in a lot of like the monster truck and NASCAR fans.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it's technically still theater.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
You know,
Get someone on the Jumbotron, and have half the stadium get sprayed down. I mean, this could be a thing.
I'll be honest. If there's anything that I never want to see turned into a theme park ride, it's anything Mad Max related. I don't ever want to see the Mad Max theme park ride. I prefer that world to be a pure artifact of the silver screen.
No, I agree.
That being said, I would love to see a Mad Max board game, maybe.
I'm surprised it's not a video game.
There is. They did.
There?
Oh, yeah.
Did
No,
they
it
do?
came out last year.
Adina Menzel would sing, "Witness me, shiny and chrome, witness me."
Oh, what have I done?
Damn it, that's going to occupy a small portion of my creative brain, and I'm going to start coming up with it's going to be awful. It's going to be just fucking terrible.
Just so you know, there is a Mad Max video game. I played the crap out of it. It was actually a lot of fun.
Mad Max of the 80s or now? They did one in conjunction with...
So the company that made it, they got the rights to do a Mad Max video game, and then
but when?
Partway into like a few years ago.
Oh wow!
Remember
okay.
that like the average development time for a video game is like 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I
They
just
got
didn't
it,
know
like,
if it was
several
like
years
an
ago.
Atari game or whether it was a now game.
No. This game came out last year.
Oh, okay.
And so they got the rights to do it, and they started working on it. And then George Miller announced that he was doing a new film, and then they were like, "Ah, man!" And so they actually got together with the studio, and they got some preliminary information. They were able to like modify the game to make it fit more into the movie. It is set. I don't remember whether it's set before or after the events of the movie. I think it's before, but the idea is that. They tried too hard to tie it into the movie. Like, the main bad guy is another one of Morton Joe's children, who's a warlord of this whole territory. And I think Gastown is in the game, and you go to Gastown, but the story really doesn't matter at all. Like, you don't really care about the bulk of the story because the focus of the story is actually a subplot that runs through the game, which is there's this woman and her daughter who are slaves to one of the warlords, and he ends up like sort of kind of rescuing them, but he doesn't really want to, and the woman basically slowly coerces him over time because he's doing all these jobs. You're working for different warlords. helping them out against the main warlord bad guy. And so you end up like, this woman ends up like convincing you to help her. And so you do, and you end up trying to help her, and she's trying to convince you to like take her and her daughter like out of the wasteland and find some place to get away. And you finally kind of succumb to like, all right, I help you. And then that's the point where they murder them. They murder the characters, and then Max basically loses his shit, and you end up with the end game, which is like a big giant car chase where he has to fight the main bad guy.
Car chase!
But that game is nothing but car chases. Car chases and fist fighting. The car chases in that game are brilliant. But anyway, the what I was saying earlier, like this movie's an action movie at its heart, but the story is so well told.
Yes,
The storytelling is so deft and so masterful.
The story is well presented. It hardly is told. You know,
Right, like I said, yeah.
Which is saying something. I mean, really. I mean, the fact that it was that successful and that good in a society where literally everything has to be spoon-fed, you know, series finales, like, you didn't answer each and every single one of the questions to my satisfaction, so it sucked. To be like, you don't have to know everything. Shut the fuck up, you know?
You know, and it's interesting to me too that like the themes of the film are explicitly stated in the film. When we basically they have that same conversation where he point blank asks Furiosa, "What's your motivation for your character?" And she goes, "Redemption." They're looking for hope. Those are the themes of the film.
Yeah.
Hope and redemption
And survival.
And survival, which is
That's everybody.
Max, if you think about it, like there's a polarity there. You have each of that cluster of characters that forms. Max represents survival at all costs. Furiosa represents redemption for a dark past, and the girls represent hope for a better future from a life of servitude. And while all three of them have to make horrible sacrifices in the end, most of them get what they want. I mean, a couple of, I think one of the girls dies. All the ancillary characters dies. Nux, and again, it comes back to like Nux is like the one character who's truly noble in the film. He just was noble for the wrong reasons for a while, because he gets exactly what he wanted the whole film.
Yep.
What he was always working for.
He gets the glory.
Yeah, he just wanted to sacrifice himself in the service of a greater cause. He wanted his life to mean something.
We may come to the sequel to Fury Road and find out that Furiosa's like, I ain't running this shit. Nux is running things, and maybe he's doing a better job, or who knows? You know,
He's dead. He died. Remember? He got blown up.
He flipped the car over and blowed up.
Yeah.
did we see him actually die? I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
No, okay, to quote, she went under the wheels of the truck.
Yeah. She went
But did you see?
She went under the wheels.
Perhaps I'm slipping more into Hollywood, where dead isn't necessarily dead unless.
If he's not dead, it totally nullifies his character motivation.
That's true. I mean, if Nux came back in 2 and is running the scene, like.
In the same way that Aliens 3 invalidates the story arcs of 2 of the main characters, and actually invalidates the story arcs of even Ripley's character in the second Alien by killing the character that she spent the previous movies trying to save.
In the first 3 minutes of the movie.
And that's why I am very, very hopeful for the Alien film that can't remember what's his name.
Blomkamp.
Blomkamp is working on, because what he said is it's going to take place after Aliens and before Alien 3, but it won't negate Alien 3. He was a little deft about how he worked around that, but it's going to be a sequel to Aliens.
That's silly.
And basically, as far as I'm concerned, there really are only 2 Alien. There's Alien and Aliens.
Yeah.
The other 2 are just bullshit, and I don't even know what the fuck that's about. That's my opinion.
I mean, I
Alien 3 is a Fincher film, though.
Yeah,
but not.
I liked the 4th one but I also really dug that director from City of Lost Children.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Luc Besson?
No. It's a different French guy.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, he did this. The guy that did City of Lost Children, and I think he did Dark City as well.
Did he do the Resurrection, Alien Resurrection?
Yeah, he did Alien Resurrection because half that cast were people that he'd worked with in previous films. The little dude and the little engineer guy in the wheelchair was. He also did Delicatessen. Yeah, if you've seen Delicatessen.
I have seen Delicatessen.
The little French dude in the wheelchair in Alien Resurrection is actually a French actor who's been in a bunch of that guy's movies. He's in both City of Lost Children and Delicatessen, and he's apparently just a brilliantly famous French comedic actor who does a lot of clown work and stuff. And that was his like American English speaking language film debut.
What, Resurrection was?
Alien Resurrection, yeah.
Interesting.
Sorry, little.
Hey, we get off on
film
divergent
trivia.
tangents all over the place.
So what did you think?
This is your first viewing.
Yeah, as your first viewing. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
We got into it, it was like, this is nuts. I mean, this is just fucking nuts. I mean, it's that movie is relentless. It just, there's a moment where you were like, and now we can breathe. There's like two,
take a breath,
maybe three like blackouts.
There's actually more than that. There's actually
doesn't seem like that.
It doesn't. That's what I mean. It doesn't feel like it. There's several beats in the film. And actually, it actually has a fairly tight structure, but there's several beats in the film where the movie slows down just enough to give you a little bit of breathing room.
Right. And did you appreciate, this is one thing I appreciated so much about Fury Road, they didn't try to jump in with little jokey bits. No. I mean, there was a couple of things that struck me as a little like, oh, okay, but nothing like we're going for a laugh here.
No, I thought I thought the one thing they did that was amusing was when he was shooting at the bullet farmer and he missed 3 times and she gets behind him and he's like, fine, you do it.
Yeah. That's even the comedic elements of that film are kind of bittersweet.
Yeah, totally.
Like there's everything is so shitty.
Yeah.
That even the jokes are kind of slightly shitty.
And the thing as we've said, they're mainly practical effects. But the thing that I found was amazing and brilliant and simple was the actors they hired were amputees and dwarves and going simply like
and whatever that guitar guy was. What the fuck was that?
Apparently, he is a relatively well known avant-gardist performance artist and musician.
I mean, tell me that was prosthetics or makeup. He doesn't actually look like that under.
No, that was makeup, not prosthetics, just makeup. I think he did his own makeup.
Wow, it looked like his face was just destroyed.
Yeah, no, just makeup.
Wow.
Well, you never really got a good close-up look at his face.
Yeah, that's true.
And for part of the film, he's wearing a mask.
Right. That's what I'm saying. When the mask comes off, it looks like his face is about his half mouth. It was just enormous, this gaping maw that took up most of his skull.
Same with Joe. Like when they tear the mask off, you don't really. They never really show it. I mean, there's a couple.
We never got to see what he looked like before the mask went on.
Right.
I should have prepared. I can't remember the actor's name. So this is a trivia moment. I think I asked you guys beforehand if you right before we started watching the movie if you had seen Mad Max recently. So the original film Mad Max. The villain, the guy who I was raving about his like lunatic performance, he's the main bad guy and is the driving force behind the movie because he's the reason all this shit happens.
Toe Cutter.
Toe Cutter, the leader of the biker gang. So that actor is the actor who plays Immortan Joe.
Toe Cutter is
so the actor who plays Toe Cutter, and I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head. And he's a fairly well-known Australian actor. He's a big guy. Kind of chunky guy, but he played Toe Cutter in the original Mad Max, and probably the best performance of the film. Like just this really truly gonzo crazy performance. He's nuts, and it really very charismatic. And apparently much of what he was doing in the original Mad Max was improvised. He plays. That's him as a Morton Joe.
Hugh Keys Byrne.
Yeah, Hugh Keys Byrne. And here's the thing about Hugh. When I saw the trailer before the movie came out, I saw the trailer, and the first time I saw a Morton Joe in the trailer, I was like, "Dad, he looks." With that mask and the hair and the makeup, and you can only see his eyes. And I went, he looks really familiar.
Yeah.
That's not Toe Cutter.
When the film was
Cutter's
made,
dead.
he was
He died horribly.
he's 68 years old
Yeah.
and kicking ass. He's an Indian actor out of Kashmir.
Is he?
Yeah. Yep, 6'2".
He didn't really look Indian.
No, well,
He's white, pale makeup.
No. Even in
in
the
the-
original Mad Max, like I can see that he's of South Asian descent, but he does. You can't really tell.
Yeah.
Looking at him.
Yeah.
So I did not know that he was Indian.
but I like little stuff like that. Like, oh look, they brought it somewhat full circle.
No, absolutely. Like, I for a moment watching the trailers, I thought, did they bring Toe Cutter somehow
did
survive?
he? Yeah.
And then I realized, later I read that was him, and I was like, he was just, he hired the actor and gave him the prominent villain role because he was the prominent villain in the first film, and never really got like, because the original Mad Max was a really amazing film, but didn't get the same kind of. It was a cult classic.
Yeah.
But the Road Warrior created a whole genre,
Right.
established a new tone and a new approach to a genre, pre-existing genre, and that actor never really was a part of any of that.
Yeah.
So now to bring him full circle, I thought was a really awesome thing, and also like he was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, when you spend the entire movie acting through a mask,
Yeah. That's
and you still are like one of the most terrifying elements in the film. Like that's just brilliant. Mm-hmm. What were you just showing me?
They've named the sequel Mad Max: The Wastelands.
Hey,
It's in pre-production right now, according to IMDb.
Wastelands.
The Wasteland. Singular,
Okay.
excuse me. The Wasteland.
The Wasteland.
The Wasteland.
Yeah,
Mad Max: The Wasteland. So I'm all about that.
I'm very. See, here's the thing.
It's,
I am.
It's going to be a better sequel than Happy Feet 2.
Here's the
Another
thing.
George Miller.
I don't know what else he can say on the subject. I don't. I am totally and completely willing to sit down and hear whatever he has to say on the topic. I just don't know what that is, which kind of excites me, but I'm also a little trepidatious because I'm like, he could have. Fury Road felt like a mic drop.
Yeah.
It felt like a mic drop. Like you could have just walk away and go, done. I'm out.
Well, did you
top
watch the
that.
Academy Awards?
No, I never did.
I'd say all but I think 2 of the awards it was up for. It won like 6
Oh,
or 7.
I knew it swept. I knew it swept.
And the thing is, a film like that is usually Hollywood
Yeah,
Academy
genre.
Award poison. They would never even look at it. They hold their nose and maybe we'll give you one special effects, but fuck, they gave it sound and art and costume and design. I'm like, I like that. I
Sometimes
respect
a movie
that.
comes along that's just so well made that they have no choice.
Yeah.
In order to maintain even the tiniest shred of credibility, they
Tiniest.
have to just like give them as many awards as we can legitimately get away with.
Well, that's why they waited until Return of the King. It's like, all right, we'll throw a best picture Oscar over to this one because otherwise there'll be riots in the nerdocracy out there.
Listen, the nerdocracy is quite large
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and spends a lot of money.
We're running the show now.
Well, that's right. The nerds who grow up being called nerd in a derogatory sense in the 80s and maybe early 90s are now running the show, making the films that they wanted to see when they were a kid and want to see now, and it's making money. So all of a sudden, it's money speaks. That's the language of Hollywood. Like, I don't care what you're doing. If you're making me money, you can put on Mad Max the musical movie if you want to. If it's making me money, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a green light.
I wish that was true.
So one of the things that Mad Max did not have that I noticed, I mean, you said there was a video game that really wasn't a tie-in to the film initially.
Initially, and then they made it.
They
into
made
a tie-in,
it,
yeah.
but Mad Max did not have any, really, now get your Burger King glasses with, with Joe and
Your Happy Meal.
Furiosa and the whole group.
I think I might be a little concerned if it did. I don't think I want to.
Well,
see
start
a Fury
getting
Road.
concerned because I just read that there's a spray paint line that's coming out for the sequel called Shiny and Chrome.
Medication time. Medication time.
We ran out of time. I'll tell you about that line of spray paints and the line of watercolors for kids next week.
9 Billion Names of Pod was conceived, written, and performed by Michael Reed and Dan Bauman, with Abdul Beni Hassan as the sound of splintering wood. Research, transportation, and exasperated looks by Courtney Lohner. Technical assistance by Cubase, Pro Tools, Skynet, QLab, Deep Thought, Big Brother, and Eddie, your shipboard computer. Financial consideration provided by the Wayne Foundation, Stark Industries, the Prana Brothers, and LexCorp. Legal counsel by the Office of Howard and Fine.
Witness! Mediocre.
Our intro music was written by Tim Akers. This podcast was sponsored by Deep Shack Records and is a production of Audio Primate. Throw us a couple stars on iTunes, why don't you? Check us out on dadsgarageradio.net. Listen, watch on YouTube. Listen on SoundCloud. Stream us on Stitcher. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter or email us, comlinkandbillionpod.com. Until this happens again, I'm Dan Bauman.
I'm Bernard Setaro Clark.
I'm Michael Reed.
LOZ!
Audio Primate.